That's not a comic book. Now that's a comic book.
And now let's go on to Black Panther Volume 1, the Jack Kirby Black Panther. The original, this is the first, I believe, 7 issues. This is the first 7 issues of Jack Kirby's original run on Black Panther. I have mixed feelings on this, but let's get into just the history of Jack Kirby and Black Panther for those that don't know. So Jack Kirby was in the comics business for frickin' ever. That dude was a comic book artist going all the way back into World War II. He drew some of the original Captain America comics before, Stan Lee resurrected him and stuff. Jack Kirby was around forever. And as such, he was expected to draw some really awful stuff that we look back on now and go, oh god. Like, we look back at comics as they originally were, and some of it is great, some of it's fantastic, but a lot of it is shameful and embarrassing. Comic books are an art form, but they did have an infancy, and that was it. So Jack Kirby had to draw, black people as, literally black and cowardly with big lips and stuff. And he felt ashamed of that. He had to draw, Japanese people as rats. And he really, that weighed on him, that he depicted people in that way. Keep in mind, I don't want to say, I'm pretty sure Jack Kirby's Jewish, too. I know Siegel and Schuster were. I can't remember if Jack Kirby was as well. But a lot of people in the business were Jewish. And so they knew what it was like to be discriminated and persecuted against. And he definitely knew people. If he was not himself, he definitely knew others. And he was broke as balls. I mean, he was drawing comic books in the 40s. Comic books sold like hotcakes, but that did not translate to artists and writers getting paid a lot. It was, if you wanted to pursue a creative career, comic books were the bottom of the barrel for what you could do. But he did it, and so you drew what you got paid to draw. And so Black Panther was Jack Kirby's apology for that. Jack Kirby created this character because drawing those kind of things, being a part of that discrimination, weighed on his conscience, and so he created Black Panther to essentially make up for it, and what a way to do it. That being said, I love Jack Kirby's art. I've really come around on Jack Kirby's art. One sec, I'll be right back. I love Jack Kirby's art. I've really come around on it. I used to not be the biggest fan, but, placing it in the time it was coming out, it's really fantastic. I even made this, damn it, fucking thing. I need to find a better way to get that in there. I made this Metron Mobius chair. I modeled it in 3D and printed it because I kind of fell in love with Jack Kirby's stuff. Just looking at the art, I really love how he uses geometry, and I'll talk about that here in a second. I don't even know if you could tell that light was on, so it probably wasn't worth all the stuff I did. Anyway, so I really like Jack Kirby as an artist, and I like a lot of his ideas. If you'd like to see me kind of talk more about Jack Kirby as a writer, you can go watch The Geeky Gentleman. I believe it was just Milan and I did on Jack Kirby's Fourth World Omnibus Volume 1. Because his stuff, his art is undeniably fantastic. And his storytelling and his writing has a lot of potential. And that's what's going on in here. There's a lot of potential. There's a lot of interesting ideas. Maybe it's the era it was written in. Maybe it's just his quality as a writer. I'm tempted to say more the quality as a writer thing. I think he's a really good ideas guy. I think Jack Kirby has a lot of really interesting ideas. All the New Gods stuff I find really fascinating. And depending on what he's writing, when he's writing in really mythic tone, really, really grandiose, big idea kind of stuff, I really do enjoy it. But when he's writing what are supposed to be normal people, or maybe eccentrics, but not grandiose, godlike figures, it doesn't work for me. I don't care for how Jack Kirby writes individuals. Or not individuals. I don't care for how Jack Kirby writes people. I like how he writes mythic beings. I don't like how he writes individual people. And so, yeah, that translates into here. There's some really neat ideas. There's a coup that goes on. There's, all this lost ancient civilization stuff in this. I'm not going to bother summarizing this because it's basically, it's pretty much 3 stories. So you get 3 stories in 7 issues. That's pretty good. Or, 2.5, because one's setting up for the next volume, which I'll talk about next week. Which maybe I'll come around more on Jack Kirby's writing. Maybe it just takes a little bit of getting used to. But I do enjoy this, just not as much as I feel I would if not for the fact that I think Jack Kirby would be a stronger outliner. I think Jack Kirby would be good at outlining the direction of a story as opposed to writing it out himself. Because I read through some of this, and I'm just like, it's well done. It's just the writing's so clunky and exposition heavy that it bugs me. I really have a hard time getting through parts of it because of that. And I said this when we did our Fourth World Omnibus review. And, I don't mean this as an insult, but Jack Kirby's writing has a tendency to put me to sleep. I really don't like how he writes, unfortunately. Like I say, the plots, I think, are brilliant, especially for the time. There's some pretty clever stuff. There's a coup that starts up and kind of immediately ends in this last issue, or last 2 issues, rather. But at the same time, I just don't think that the dialogue works. I don't think that his narration works, because this is third-person narrator stuff, too. So that kind of bugs me. I don't know. I don't care for his ability as a writer. There's nothing wrong with it. It's pretty average for the time, but there was a lot better stuff out there. Bill Finger's Batman I've read and I enjoyed significantly more on just a writing standpoint. But let's talk about the art, because that's where this really does shine through. There's just some crazy awesome visuals in this book. Look at that. What I like about Jack Kirby's art is he is in love with geometry. It's a shame that Kirby died when he did, because it was right before 3D modeling and CGI took off. And what 3D modeling is great at is geometry, because it's all based on geometric models and curves. I'll try not to get too far into the realm of vocabulary for 3D models, but you look at some of the stuff he draws in this, and it's just freaking so detailed. He's pretty good at the human form, but what he is fantastic at is geometric intricacies. Look at the top of this little ancient blaster. See all the detail put into that? It could have just been a flat surface with a button on it. But he puts so much detail into every little line and curve and shape. He really loves just expanding on geometry for all of this stuff. And that's really, really cool. And one of the things I love about him, I would have loved to see Jack Kirby do some 3D modeling. He could have done some fantastic stuff. Just look at the backgrounds for some of this. That shit doesn't need to be there. Look at that, like, piping and all the stuff on the wall behind them. None of that needs to be there. But it's also intricately put in. It's also perfectly detailed, and it just gives it more weight. It makes it all feel more real. When you have something as fantastical as all this, that really does help keep you invested in the story. And like I said, I might enjoy his writing more as I get used to it, because as I got further and further into this, I was really enjoying it. And part of that might just be falling in love with the art. Some of this stuff just looks so freaking cool. Let me find the gong, because that was epic. Is humans, I'm kind of hit and miss on. Some of them I like, some of them I think are kind of bulgy, and there's a couple panels where I don't think Black Panther's head looks like it's in the right position. I love this underground samurai city in here. It's just really neat. Let's see if I can find... Again, I'm just showing off the art here, because that's why you want to buy Jack Kirby stuff, is to look at the art. I'm a little behind. I gotta skip further ahead. There's just one panel where I think I noticed it the worst. And it's problematic because everything else in that panel was so cool. Yeah, here we go. He's running away from all these soldiers shooting at him for this vial of miracle, like, elixir, immortality juice. And he's blowing shit up. I don't know, is it just me, or does his head just look like it's kind of at a weird angle there in that panel? And it sounds like a nitpicky thing, but there's stuff like that all over this, where, people's bodies just seem like they're kind of in unnatural poses. It's really small stuff like that, but it's such a consistent thing that I feel like I had to mention it. His physical drawings of people are probably his weakest, but honestly, compared to all the stuff that was around at that time, this was way ahead of the curve. Like, all the comic book artists that are working now, they stand on the shoulders of Jack Kirby, because he did elevate comic book art in a fantastic way. And this is just, it's so cool to see. I'm trying to think how I want to put this. So for a book that was written as an apology to not just black people, but pretty much all minorities, written as an apology for how they've been portrayed, giving us all something to grab onto that's just intrinsically cool. It's a comic book character that isn't just, you always hear this, well, if you want to write diverse characters, just write them like you would any other character. Just make them a black guy, make them Hispanic, whatever. No, that's not diversity. That's black-facing white characters. Or brown-facing, or what have you. What true diversity is telling stories that can only be black people, that can only be Hispanic people, that can only be women. It's telling stories like that. That's true diversity, and that's what this is. Because, Black Panther is this African king, this honor-bound great warrior, and that's an intrinsic part of his character. So you can't have a white guy be Black Panther. It's complete, does not compute. And so this, interestingly, isn't very racially, how do I put this? This story, the stories in this are not intrinsically about race. They have very little, if anything, to do with Black Panther being a black superhero, being an African king or anything. That stuff starts up toward the end. The last 2 issues were setting up for the next trade. That stuff certainly starts up, but as of right now, it's not at the forefront. And I'm not sure how I feel about that. Because part of me, you just heard me rant about the importance of true diversity in writing. But at the same time, there's a switch to it, because you don't want your diverse characters to only have stories that are about minority issues. You don't want your diverse characters to be locked into a certain box. You want them to be truly diverse, to be able to tell stories both about things that only they can deal with and prove their merit to other superheroes and be just as capable as all those others. And that's kind of what this is. And I think that might be a smart move. He was showing Black Panther be just as capable as all the other heroes that are around in the Marvel Universe at the time. But now he's transitioning it to show how Black Panther is not only just as capable, but is also unique among them. And that's really cool. And that's what I liked about the story in this. So my story complaints, they're not even story complaints. The stories are fine and fairly typical strange goofiness for comic books of the time. So the story itself, the plot is good. It's the writing, it's a lot of the dialogue and the narration I just do not care for. There's a lot of arguments that go on for way too long, like they crash a plane. Don't irritate me with small talk, Mr. Little. Just be grateful that I could strike some sparks from this flint. But I'm almost certain that I heard the sound of a horn. It couldn't have been the wind. See here, Collector, I'm cold and wet and miserable and scarcely in the mood for further conversation. You don't understand. I understand that our chances of getting back have fallen to 0, that my people may be doomed by Zonda's anger, even as you may be doomed by mine. No. Be still, I say. It would take but one more word from your treacherous mouth to snap the bit of control is left to me. I'll risk it. The sound of that horn was the faint but unmistakable clarity. Don't you see? We're not alone. There are others here. Like, that's just a really long back and forth to me about, dude, shut up, I'm annoyed. No, I'm serious. This is actually a good thing. This isn't small talk. That was that entire conversation. I'm not trying to small talk. I understand you're pissed, but there might actually be real people here. And there's a lot of that going on. The dialogue's very stilted. The way characters interact is pretty stilted. And like I say, for the time, that was fairly average. So I can't complain about it too much. Part of it's just, the problem with reading older comics. Steve and Alex both are huge advocates for a return to third-person narration in comic books. I am not. I wouldn't mind third-person narration, but I don't want it to be like this, where a lot of times third-person narration would just tell you what you're already seeing, frankly, because the art wasn't good enough to communicate that. So I don't really have a problem with it being gone, as long as the art's clear enough to see what's going on and they find clever ways to inform the reader of things that, they might not be able to pick up on. I'm totally cool with it. As far as, he jumped. Quickly, I must jump! I don't care. That is totally lost on me. But if you like it, good on you.
That's not a comic book. Now that's a comic book.